What's going on, and welcome back. This is To Be Continued With. I'm Mike, and today we're starting off the year 2022 with the biggest movie of 2021. In case you haven't guessed by now, we're going to break down Spider-Man No Way Home. It stars Tom Holland and some pretty amazing friends. So with that being said, let's cue up the intro because here we go. Between Marvel, Disney, and Sony providing us the third installment of this Spider-Man franchise, we see that the movie picks up exactly where Far From Home left off. Spider-Man swoops down to pick up MJ, who's being interrogated by a bunch of New Yorkers on the street regarding her relationship with the web-slinger. They basically make their way to Aunt May's apartment, where we see May and Happy Hogan calling it quits on their relationship. With the world knowing Pete's double life, Damage Control steps in and arrests Peter, MJ, Aunt May, Happy, and Ned. We get some funny moments while they're getting interrogated, but May is told to lawyer up because she could possibly face charges for child endangerment. And boy, does she get a really good lawyer. For fans of the Netflix shows produced by Marvel, we get to see Charlie Cox reprise his role as the devil from Hell's Kitchen. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Murdock shows up to represent Pete, and it's a really great Easter egg and a great nod to that character. But getting back to things, we really see that he is a good lawyer because he gets the charges dropped for Peter. And at the same time, even though the charges are dropped, some still see Pete as your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, while a lot of people still agree with J. Jonah Jameson as him being a masked menace. Now keep in mind that at this point, MJ, Ned, and Peter are looking to get accepted into MIT after they graduate high school. But with everything that's going on, it's simply not going to happen. So Pete gets the cool idea to pay Doctor Strange a visit and ask him to cast a spell to make everyone forget that him and Spider-Man are the same person. Mind you, while Doctor Strange is casting the spell, Pete starts interfering and asking that certain folks remember who he is. And that's where things get actually crazy, because Doctor Strange messes up the spell and learns that Pete didn't even try to plead his case with the MIT board to get accepted. And that's where things get really, really crazy. With Peter now taking Doctor Strange's advice, he finds the MIT rep sitting in traffic while making her way to the airport. He starts pleading his case so that he and his friends can make their way and get accepted into MIT. It's at this moment when Peter's tingle goes off. Long story short, all hell breaks loose, and we get to see Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. We get a great fight between Peter and Doc Octopus, which is not only amazing, but confusing to Doc Ock, since he doesn't recognize the Peter who's under the Spidey mask. Now, Peter quickly gets the upper hand due to the nanotech in his Iron Spider suit, taking control of Doc Ock's tentacles, handling the situation fairly easy until his tingle starts to go off again, and we see that a goblin bomb is thrown on the bridge. Before it can go off, Peter is magically transported back to the Sanctum Sanctorum. Now, Doctor Strange has brought back Peter to the Sanctum along with Dr. Octopus, who is now in prison in a magical holding cell. Strange begins to explain to Pete that something went wrong with the spell. Somehow, it's bringing individuals from across the multiverse into this universe. And he proves his point by asking Doc Ock if he knows who Spider-Man is, which he answers yes. Then he asks him, does he know who Peter Parker is? He goes, yes. He goes, is this Peter Parker? Doc Ock says no. Doctor Strange tells Peter that he needs to collect each and every one of these individuals to place them back in these magical holding cells so Doctor Strange can fix the spell. Long story short, he provides Pete with a magical device on his wrist that shoots out kind of like a magical web to entangle these individuals and basically bring them back. Now, with the help of MJ and Ned, they start their mission. First up is Electro. He's a villain from the Andrew Garfield set of movies, and he starts reconstructing himself in this universe and states that he really likes the energy that this universe is giving off. Now, mind you, he's not easy to capture, but with a little bit of help from the Sandman, who's from the 1990s OG trilogy of our web slinger, he does help Pete capture him. But since Doctor Strange mentioned that he needs all these individuals together, Pete has to turn on Sandman, and he does. We now see the Doc Ock, the Sandman, Electro, and the Lizard, who Doctor Strange did capture off camera, all in holding cells, all acknowledging each other from their respective movies, and Doc Ock explains that he knows who dropped that pumpkin bomb on the bridge. Pete now gets a call from Aunt May, and she lets him know that she's with Norman Osborn. He seems a bit dazed and confused as to what's going on, but when Pete gets there, May tells Peter that he needs to help these individuals. And, long story short, it does throw a monkey wrench into Doctor Strange's plans because it's going to take away from them fulfilling their destiny and certain death. Now at this point, the villains agree with Peter's plan to try to cure them. So, with the help of Norman Osborn, who's kind of playing the role of Mr. Nice Guy and looking to help Pete, they all make their way to Happy Hogan's apartment in Long Island City. With that being said, first up is Otto, and his link to his tentacles and his mechanical arms are fixed. They end up putting a dampener on Electro, which little by little starts taking away his powers and curing him of his electric setup. But, out of nowhere, Peter's tingle starts to go up. As he's trying to pinpoint where the danger is coming from, Norman goes berserk. An all-out brawl breaks out. The Lizard and the Sandman do make a break for it. Aunt May is able to capture the cures and the devices that they were working on. But as I mentioned, a big fight breaks out between the Green Goblin and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It's an amazing fight, pun intended, between the Green Goblin and Peter Parker. It literally goes through floors and floors and floors of the building complex. They end up in the lobby where we get to see how deadly and sinister Norman Osborn can be. He actually instructs and guides his Goblin Glider and takes out Aunt May. And when I say he takes her out, he really hits her hard. Really, really hard. He then throws a pumpkin bomb at May, and Peter jumps in the way to try to stop it, but it goes off. Here, we see the cops show up. Norman is actually cackling like a maniac, and he escapes. But right after that, we see that May's injuries are very severe. She actually dies in Peter's hands, and this is where we get the tearjerker moment and the one line that we've been waiting 3 movies of this new iteration of Spider-Man to come to light. It's the line that we all know since we were little kids and picked up our first Spider-Man comic. With great power comes great responsibility. Now, we cut to Ned and MJ, who is at Ned's mom's house. They're worried about Peter, so Ned kind of flares his arms in the air and says, "I wish I knew where Peter was." And we see a little flicker of those little portals that Doctor Strange and Wong are able to make. So MJ notices this and tells Ned to try it again, but this time to concentrate. So with the sling ring that Peter took off of Doctor Strange when he trapped him in the mirror dimension, starts casting a spell. And he says, "Show me Peter Parker." Portal opens up and we get a Spider-Man that comes through. But this isn't Tom Holland. This is Andrew Garfield. And obviously, with them being a little skeptic of who he is, he actually clings to the wall and shows them that he is a true Spider-Man. With that out of the way, MJ pleads with Ned to try it one more time and to concentrate. So Ned, with the sling ring in hand, tries to open up a second portal. And it does open, and we do get someone who walks through it. And lo and behold, it's Mr. Tobey Maguire, the OG Spider-Man himself. After some funny dialogue that pretty much is the same dialogue that Andrew Garfield mentioned when he was trying to prove that he was Spider-Man, they're all in agreement that Tom Holland is going to need their help. They try to figure out where he is and where they can find him, and they do. Now with MJ and Ned locating Peter, they start to hug him, they start to console him because of the simple fact that he lost a lot. He lost the one family member that was with him through the ups and downs of his life. Then they introduce Tom Holland to his variants. We see all 3 Spider-Man interacting together, but Tom says that this is all his fault. He's got to send everyone back. They start sharing a moment about that one line again, that with great power comes great responsibility. Obviously, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield let Peter know that it was Uncle Ben who was the one who told them that phrase, and they start talking about their losses. And Andrew Garfield kind of explains that he lost his MJ, while Tobey Maguire states that he lost his Uncle Ben. They have a touching moment. They actually man up and they start trying to figure things out. So what do? They make their way back to the high school so the three Peter Parkers can put their intelligence to work. Now in the high school lab, we see all three Peter Parkers go to work and put their smarts to fixing up these cures and these devices that can help these villains. And we're ready for our final act. MCU Peter makes a video call to the Daily Bugle and lets the villains know that he could have killed them and sent them back at any given moment. But he did give them a chance. So now, if they want to step up, he lets them know, I'll be at the Statue of Liberty. So if you want to fight me and confront me, here's your chance. It's blasted all over the internet. The whole world knows that Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is about to take on the fight of his life. The three Spider-Men prepare for what's coming next. They're at the Statue of Liberty, and the first person to start showing up is Electro. He's also joined by the Lizard and the Sandman. Now, this is where things get crazy, because you know that scene that made its way to the internet and social media right before the movie came out, where there was only one Spider-Man taking on three villains? We get to see what the real scene is like. It's all three Spider-Man jumping towards our villains, and the fight goes off without a hitch. Unfortunately, it doesn't go in our hero's favor. Now, to take a line from Infinity War, we are in the endgame now. Since the Spider-Men all end up tripping all over each other, they regroup and realize that they have to work together. And we get that infamous meme of the three Spider-Men pointing at each other, and it's classic. Long story short, they regroup and go in for their second attempt. With some crazy web slinging, they manage to take down the Sandman first, then the Lizard. And from there, with the help of Doc Ock, they end up depowering Electro, which only leaves the Green Goblin. But at this point, Doctor Strange ends up being freed from the mirror dimension when Ned is opening up a portal as he's making his way on the Statue of Liberty. You have to watch the movie to really get the grand scale of what's happening here. But Doctor Strange is also amazed that Peter Parker is actually pulling off this attempt. Now, at this point, Norman shows up, throws a pumpkin bomb, and blows up that magical box that Doctor Strange was going to use to return everyone back to their multiverse. But since the box is gone, we have to get down to basics. And we get an intense final showdown between the most famous Spider-Man villain, portrayed by Willem Dafoe, and our MCU's own Tom Holland, who literally has a grudge against him because of what happened with Ant-Man. Now in this fight, Tom Holland is not holding back. Round 2 is Peter basically going all out against Norman Osborn. And Norman's not holding back either. He's actually still taunting Pete and blaming him for Aunt May's death. At one point, Peter ends up pinning the Goblin down with some webbing, gives him the opportunity to pick up the Goblin glider, and as he's ready to impale him, he gets stopped by Tobey Maguire, which gives Norman the opening to stab him. As OG Spider-Man falls to the ground, Andrew Garfield does throw Spider-Man, Tom Holland, the cure for the Goblin. He injects him with it, and Norman starts reverting back to normal. With all the villains cured and basically taken out of the picture, Pete informs Doctor Strange to cast a spell again, but he can't. He has to perform a new spell, and Peter informs him to cast a spell that will make everyone forget Peter Parker. And Doctor Strange does warn him and says, "Is this what you want? There will be no recollection of who you are." Peter nods his head, gives him the thumbs up, and he does it. Before though, he does tell MJ and Ned that he's gonna find them because he wants them to know what they went through and how much he means to them. The spell is cast, everyone gets reverted back to their multiverse or actual universe, and we have a heartfelt moment with the Spider-Man before everything goes back to normal. Fast forward to our ending. With the spell now complete, we fast forward a bit. It's around Christmas time, and we can tell because there's snow on the floor, and there's a bunch of Christmas ornaments all over the city. Pete has actually written a note so he can step up to MJ and basically try to have her remember everything that they've gone through. But when he walks into the coffee shop where she works, he sees that her and Ned are extremely happy because they've gotten their acceptance letters to MIT. They're all psyched and ready to go to college. Pete is taken back a bit when he also notices a little scar on MJ's forehead due to the battle that they just went through. And he kind of wusses out, takes a step back, and doesn't say a word. He kind of recoils to his Peter Parker luck, which basically means he ends up renting an apartment in the city, completely run down. And since no one knows who he is, we do catch a glimpse of a GED study guide, meaning there's actually no trace of Peter Parker's school records, attendance record. Pretty much, he doesn't exist, so he has to rebuild himself all over again. And in the apartment, we see a sewing machine with blue and white fabric. We cut to him jumping out the window in his classic comic book accurate SpiderMan costume. He's swinging through the city, and as he makes his way, swinging above Rockefeller Center, we come to the conclusion of No Way Home. This movie is basically the wrap-up origin. It took 3 movies to reintroduce Spider-Man to the masses. Now again, with Marvel, Disney, and Sony retelling Spider-Man's origin with an updated version and having a couple of tweaks, like Uncle Ben not being the one that says, with great power comes great responsibility, I do think this sets up the future of the franchise in a perfect way. Also, keep in mind, this is part of the MCU, so there's a great after credit scene. We actually pick up with Eddie Brock from his ending at Venom 2, Let There Be Carnage. He's in the MCU and getting drunk in a bar in Mexico. He's getting brought up to speed about the Avengers, about Tony Stark, Iron Man, and some green guy in purple pants who has anger issues. When he goes to take everything in, he actually gets transported back. So it's a little bit of a letdown, but not really, because the symbiote actually leaves a part of himself in the MCU, setting up the Venom symbiote storyline in the MCU with Tom Holland. Now, again, my name is Mike. If you like what you've heard and what you've seen, please click the subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and definitely leave a comment. Also, don't forget that my partner, BobCatt the Legen, is giving us the music for this channel. If you've been bopping your head up and down and enjoying it, please check out his Spotify page and his YouTube channel. Keep in mind, folks, this is just the beginning, and as always, it's not the end. It's simply to be continued with.